Hey everyone, I wanted to do a quick video. Actually, I'm not too sure how long it'll take, but hopefully not too long. One of my students, one of my current students, MK, had this really great idea using the Pokemon API. Hold on, let's get that up. The Pokemon API, she wanted to make a really neat application that allowed you to pick the Elite Four member you're up against. If you haven't played Pokemon, the Elite Four are like the final bosses, the last people you're going to fight, and they're really difficult. They can be really difficult. And her idea was to create a program that where if you picked a specific person and they had, say, a fire and ground type Pokemon, it would generate, using the Pokemon API, a list of Pokemon and pick for you a list of Pokemon that you could use against them that would be appropriate. So she was thinking about this during her first API Week project, and sadly, based on the docs and the way that the API currently works, it was just a little beyond scope of the project currently. But I thought it was really, really a great idea, and I kind of sat down one morning and kind of worked on it just to show that it was possible and that she could totally do it later. And I actually kind of wanted to outline the process that I went through. And if any of my students are watching, this process is actually going to be very helpful for some of you because a lot of the projects you're currently working on have some cases where you need to wait for multiple calls or make multiple calls and get data back. Let's take a look at how we can do that using jQuery, $.ajax, $.when, and then some other special things. So first things first, I have a simple HTML file. I have a form. I have a place where all the Pokemon will go. I have jQuery. And then I have the script we're going to use. And the form is going to be a place where I can put some data types in, or data types, some Pokemon types, and we'll just be able to print out the values. So really quickly, form submit here, prevent it from doing what it's going to do. And then we take the value of the only text field, text item on the page, get the value of it, replace if in case anybody put spaces anywhere around anything, replace those with nothing, and then create an array out of them. So we split on the comma. And then we just have, if you look back here, an array. So the way the Pokemon API works is that you have to call, for example, we'll go to the documentation here. It is a little slow, which will come into play when we're doing this. But for example, we go to Pokemon, we go to types. You have to call, make an API call to a specific type. And if we want to get more than one type, we're going to have to make more than one API call. We can't just make multiple calls or like make a call for multiples at the same time. So what we need to do is we need to make, in our case, 2, 3, whatever AJAX calls. And the biggest issue we have is we don't know how many things the person puts in here. I typed in 2. What if somebody puts in 3? What happens then? Well, so to make AJAX calls, we can use $.ajax. If I could type. Oh my gosh. Wow. Okay. I mean, it's like 9:30 at night. Okay, you would use $.ajax and make your calls, but how would we make multiple calls? Well, if you think about it, we could loop over the types array that we now have and maybe push into another array these AJAX calls. And then how do we wait for them all to finish? We could, if we knew how many calls we had to make, we could have like some sort of callback nested situation going on. But I'm going to show you how I tackled this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new variable, and I'm going to call it Pokemon or trainer types, and I'm going to make it equal to types.map. Now, if you remember, map is a special function or a special method, I should say, that is on all arrays. And what it will do is it'll for each element in the array, it will call this callback function. It'll be past that element, so I'm going to say type here, and I'm just going to show you real quick. If we go console.log type. Refresh this and say fire ground. Well, I spelt it wrong, but there you go. It gives us each individual type. So what we need to do is we need to make an AJAX call for each one of these. And the map method, when we call it, will actually create a new array based on whatever we return here. So what I actually want to return here is a call to the Pokemon API for each type. So it's going to look something like this. If you remember, $.ajax will return a special deferred object that behaves, I'm just going to copy something from over here, that behaves and acts like a promise. And in jQuery 3.0, it actually follows the promises a plus specification, which is a specification that the ES6 promises follow. So we say we want to get call for each type that we have. So it could be who knows however many. And we'll just say data type JSON, and let's just say method get. Cool. So if we actually console.log this now, train types. Oh, I said train types. It should be trainer types. I guess it doesn't really matter. Save this, refresh the page. Say like fire and grass. That'd be a weird combo. But you see we get this new array back that has these objects in it. And what these objects are these are the actual deferred objects from the AJAX call. Now we need to somehow wait for these to come back and actually get access to this information. So we have the ability to do that already. We have $.when. $.when will take, in our case, a comma-separated list of promises, so these AJAX calls, and be able to wait until they're all done and then give us some data. However, there is an issue. It only accepts them like this, so it'd be like promise 1, promise 2, etc. But we don't know how many times we've made a promise. We don't know how many times we've made a new AJAX call here. So we have to do something a little bit interesting. And this is where a method called .apply comes into play. So .apply is a method that we can use. It's on all functions that will allow us to do two things. So .apply. Notice that we don't call the .when here. We just use the method name, and then we use apply. And what apply is going to do is it will call when for us. So we say apply, and it takes two arguments. The first is the value that we want to what's the best way to say this? It's the context in which we want this value to be inside of this call. In our case, we don't want to change anything inside of here, so we're just going to make it null. The second thing it takes is an array, and it's going to be our trainers types. But what this does really is that it takes this array and actually calls it as if we were calling $.when, call 1, call 2, call 3, whatever, going forward. So it takes an array and actually applies them to the method or the function as if they were passed in a comma-separated list instead of an array, which allows us to sort of use these methods that were never designed to take an array and allow us to actually pass in an array. So then we can just say .then at the end, and we can say function like this. But here's the issue. So .then will pass the data. So if we call $.when, we passed in 2 AJAX calls, the .then function, that callback function, would receive 2 parameters passed to it. But again, we don't know how many things we've passed to it. So here's one of the last kind of like key pieces to get this to work the way we want. So if you go console.log arguments, arguments is a special keyword that's available inside of functions that is an array-like object of all of the arguments passed to a function. So let's see what this means. And come back here, refresh the page. Let's say like ghost and grass. Oops. So we hit enter, ghost and grass, and we get these 2 arrays here. So if you take a look at these values, the first one is an array that has 3 objects in it, or 3 values in it. The second one is another array that has 3 elements in it. And this first object is actually our data. So this is the data that we get back from $.when. It's the promise, the original promise, whether what the status of it was, I believe, and then the actual data itself. And we want access to this actual data. So there's something we need to do here. And if you recall, I said that this is an array-like object. What that means is that it's not an actual array. So what we need to do is we want to grab out this first object in each one of these two arrays here, because we want the actual data. Now we could use a for loop, but we can't use like map or filter or something like that. And I kind of want to show this using those things. So we have to use another special thing. So I'm going to say var, let's call it, I'm so bad with variables. What did I call it? I don't know. We'll call it types again. No, we're not going to call it types. That'd be terrible. Let's call it Pokémon types. We're going to see a lot of that. Anyways, we have to do something special to convert this to an actual array. And if you're in my class and you remember the lesson a couple of days ago, depending on when you watch this is Wednesday, February 24th, I showed you a quick introduction to ES6. And what we're about to do is a lot easier in ES6. This whole thing of $.when.apply and what we're about to do makes it a lot easier with ES6 because we have the spread operator and rest parameters. But what I want to do here is I need to create an array out of this array-like object. And we can do this like this. I'm going to type the line array.prototype .slice. Did I spell prototype? There we go. .slice. If you remember, the arrays have all of these different methods on them: push and map and reduce and slice and splice. And just whenever you create a new array, it just has that method. And that's because of this special prototype thing. We're not going to get into it, but array.prototype is like where all of the methods live that every new array that you create will inherit them from. But we need to do this special method called .call. .call is actually very similar to .apply, except instead of taking an array of arguments, it takes a comma-separated list of arguments. And in this case, we're only going to pass one thing to .call because we want to call the slice method, and we want to change the context of the this, and we want to make it our special arguments word. So we're going to go arguments like that. And what that will allow us to do is, if I console.log here, you'll see that it's still, oopsie doodle. You'll see that it is still the same values. Oh, I gotta go fire, grass. The Pokemon API is pretty slow. Still the same values, but it actually has all of these methods on it now. We never get into in class, and maybe you've never seen this before, but the __ proto is sort of like what it inherits, what this array actually inherits. And in this case, it's just a ton of methods and other properties that are available. So what does this mean for us? Well, now I think we can use something like map to take this a bit further. But let's move outside of this this form submit. So I'm just going to create a new function, and I'm going to call it, well, what we actually have to do here, so the whole idea of the program is that you take the types from the Pokemon trainer, you get all the different Pokemon that exist there, and we need to find the ones that are double damage. So you're thinking the damage relations here? Yeah, double damage from, double damage to. So I think we want to look for the double damage from, and we actually have to get these different types. So I'm going to make a function called get double DMG types. Just so we're not doing all of our work up in here. And we're going to say we're going to get Pokemon types. So instead of logging that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call get double damage types and pass Pokemon types into that. So if you've ever played Pokemon before, if you haven't played Pokemon, I should say, certain types of Pokemon, so like a fire and grass type Pokemon, they're going to have different abilities to them. And they might have weaknesses, or they might be really strong against things. So, for example, a fire type Pokemon would be really strong against a grass type Pokemon because fire is just going to like ravage the grass kind of thing. So the idea of this program is that we need to find from the two types, fire and grass. So this one here is the fire, this one here is the grass. We need to find the Pokemon types that are double the damage, so that these are going to be the Pokemon that are actually going to be really effective against it. So we need to create a new array, and we're ultimately going to have to call these three. I guess it's going to be more than three. Oops, what am I doing here? It's this one down here. I'm just going to close this because it's too much. How many do we have in here? Ooh, so 5, so 8 total. We have to call these 8 total types to get Pokemon that exist inside of there. And then from that, we're going to filter it down to get just 6 Pokemon and put them onto the page. So let's keep going. So we have our Pokemon types. We passed the value from here into here. And you know what, maybe I just call this Pokemon. Actually, that's not true because it is Pokemon types we're looking at here still. So what I want to do now is let's actually manipulate this data a bit more. We want to get the double damage types. So we need to get into, first of all, these arrays here, and we need to get access to these objects. So the first thing I want to do is let's actually kind of filter this data down a bit more. So let's say Pokemon types equals Pokemon types dot map. So we're gonna use map again. If you remember, map will return a new array. And let's say types there. And I'm just gonna console.log types again. And I wanna show you what types is each of them. So we'll just keep it with fire and grass for now. Come on, there we go. So it's just each individual object. And what we need to do is we need to get into the first, or sorry, each individual array. We need to get into the first object. We need to get to the damage relations, and we need to just return this array of damages. So we're gonna do return type 0, the first element in the array, dot, what is it, damage relations. I'm just gonna copy that. Bloop. Dot double damage from, and if we console.log Pokemon types now, what it should have done is it should have just picked out all of those types for us. And if I say fire, grass, it'll go ahead, it'll go grab those, and now we just have these 2 arrays. Perfect. But I don't want just these arrays like this necessarily. I actually want to have one array of just the types, so just these URLs here. So how can I make it so that these 2 arrays here sort of become one? This is a concept called flattening, where we take what is right now a multi-dimensional array. We have one array that has 2 arrays inside of it, and we flatten it down to be just a simple array. So I'm actually going to make a function for this because we're going to use it again, and I just want to go over what happens. So if we go function, we say, oops, where did I do that? Flatten. And we say it's going to take an array, so we'll just put the word array. How about array to flatten? And what we need to do inside of here is we actually have to use another array method. So we're going to return array to flatten dot reduce. So actually a lot of libraries, a lot of functional programming libraries, if you ever use like underscore or Lodash, they actually have a flatten method, but it's not actually that difficult to write your own. So the reduce method will take 2 things, so like A and B, for example, and A will be an initial value and B will be the next value, and then it'll just kind of keep going like that. Array to flatten, I'm gonna say is 2 T's, there we go. And it will reduce them down. But reducing doesn't mean you have to like add them up or sum them up or something like that. You could actually do quite a few things with that. And the reduce method actually accepts a callback function, and you can actually set an initial value. So I want to set the initial value to be an empty array. So the first time this reduce method runs, A will be this empty array, and B will be the first element in the array here. So if I return a.concat, so if I concatenate them together, a.concat b, the first time this runs, it's going to concatenate this array with an empty array, so it just makes a plain old array. The second time it runs, it's going to concatenate that array that it just made with this array, and it just spreads them out. It just flattens that array, which is really quite nice. So that should be good to go. And I'm going to go, where are we? Yeah, here we go. So I'm just going to say Pokemon types, again, equals flatten. And I'm going to pass in, Pokemon types. So now let's see what happens. So we say fire, grass. Boom, there we go. Now we just have an array of objects. And this is perfect. This is all we need. Now we can use this type URL to go and just get, again, another call for these types. If we were really thinking really smartly, we could somehow cache if we've already received fire and grass or something weird along those lines. But actually, that wouldn't happen, because how could fire and, well, I guess grass would be double damage. Yeah, because fire is right there. But let's not worry about that for now. So what we can do is, why don't I make a new array, a new variable, I should say, var damage types, let's call it, equals Pokemon types dot map function, and I'm just going to use the term type again here because it's for each type, and we want to return an AJAX call again, AJAX URL, and it's going to be, actually, what am I saying? What is the URL going to be? It's going to be type.url, because the URL nicely is provided right there for us. And I'll just do data type JSON, just for good practice. There we go, and just the get there. Cool. So if you take a look now, console.log damage types, not data types, damage types. I'm really bad with names on this one because there's so many different like calls. But if we refresh this page and I say fire, grass, and hit enter, you'll start to see some stuff. The API is actually quite slow when you start to make this many calls, so it can actually take a little bit of time, but you can see that we have all these calls here, and you can see that it's starting to get some stuff back. But again, we have this situation. We have this array of all these calls. How do we get this data out of it? Well, we're going to have to go ahead and do something similar to this. But what I want to do is I'm just going to pass that along to one last function. We'll call that function, let's call it build team. And that'll take Pokemon. So we'll just do build team, and I'll pass in damage types. There we go. So those damage types go into here, and what I can do inside of here is actually, why don't I just pass the actual data back? So scratch that for a second. I'm just going to comment this out. Oopsie doodle. What I want to do is, let's just do the call. So we'll do $.when and $apply, because remember, when does not accept an array, so we have to pass in them as a comma separated list. But again, we don't know what the comma separated list would be, how many there would be, so we have to use apply to apply all of our elements from this array as if it was a comma separated list. And similar down here, unfortunately, it doesn't come back as an actual array, so we have to make it an actual array. So I'm just going to say var Pokemon. equals arguments. No, sorry, array dot prototype dot slice dot call arguments, and we'll just pass that to build team. There we go. So we don't have to do the data stuff in the other function. And this actually becomes Pokemon. Cool. I'm just going to verify that those are the Pokemon we're looking for. So we'll do this, refresh this page, and wait for it. It does take a second. This is the biggest issue I found with this API is, and again, it's just free, easy to use. Oh, that's why it didn't work. I didn't type anything in yet. Fire, grass. But there is a point where it starts to get pretty slow. But again, it's an API that is being opened up for us, free, easy to use, and I've spelled console wrong. Story of my life. So I'm not too concerned if it's slow. You can always have like a nice loading screen if you really need something like that. So let's just verify that that indeed is what we want. Again, we have this weird issue where it's all these things. So how do we get at it? And so here's the thing. Actually, it's not a weird issue. It's just how it is. The when method passes back these arrays that have the first object is the actual data, the second thing is the success or not, and the last thing is the original promise, the original call. So we need to get this out. So this is where our friends like map really come into play. So I'm just going to say Pokemon equals Pokemon dot map. And you can actually do like these in long calls where you just like dot map dot something and just kind of keep chaining it along. But I think it helps to kind of see it done sort of one at a time, so you can see like, okay, that changed it from this thing, that changed it from that thing, etc. And what we're going to do here, we want to get at just the Pokemon. We don't care too much about any of these things. We want just the Pokemon, and ultimately we're going to want just the Pokemon's URL. But let's get to that in a second. So how do we get and map out and just get all the Pokemon into an array? Well, I guess I'm just going to call it poke. I'm really running out of names here. Return poke. Oops, no, wrong window there. Poke dot, poke. Poke is going to be the array. Poke is going to be one of these. So we need to get the first element in the array. So poke 0 dot Pokemon. That's it. Pokemon. And let's just double check that. Console.log Pokemon. Let's keep the fire and grass thing going. Takes a second, gets the data, comes back, hopefully maps it for us. There we go. So you can see there are quite a few elements here. There's quite a few things in here. Some of these arrays have 124 things. So if you have not been paying attention to Pokemon, you might know that there's actually almost like 800. I think there's 721 different kinds of Pokemon. So to reduce the scope of this, to reduce what we want to do here, what I'm going to do is, actually, no, we don't have to do that because this is not the actual program. And what we're going to do ultimately is just pick 6 of these at random. So I'm going to leave it at this big number of Pokemon. Sorry if this video seems a little all over the place. It was just a unscripted, just trying to show some of my students how this is done. So let's take this array that we have here and let's run it through our flatten method or our flatten function to flatten the bad boy down. That's weird. Pokemon equals Pokemon flatten and pass in Pokemon. And let's see what Pokemon gets back. So it's going to be this huge array. I mean, not really huge. If you think about it, computers definitely have huger arrays. It's not a word, but I'm going to go with it. It's going to be this huge array of Pokemon that are double damage to fire and grass. It's just going to be all these objects. So 575 possible options. You got like your Sandshrews, your Cubones, and your Rhyhorns. What else we got here? What is that one? I've never heard that one before. There's so many of them. Jesus. Okay, here we go. All right, so that's fine. We have all the Pokemon we need. What we need to do now is we just need to pick at random 6 of them. So what we should do is we need to make a function that is going to just randomly pick these Pokemon out. So I'm going to make a function called get random Pokemon. So it's going to take, I guess, an array, Pokemon array, and it's going to return a random number, a random version of that. So let's do it on 2 lines. So in order to get a random element from an array, we need to get a random index. So I'm going to say var index equals math.random, or sorry, math.floor, math.random. If you remember, math.random will return a number between 0 and 1, but excluding 1, so up to, but not including 1. So we use floor to keep it down to 0 and not go all the way up. And we times it by Pokemon array dot length. So that will give us a random element, a random index from the array there. And we can return then Pokemon array index. So every time we run this function, it's going to take that array, return generate a random number, and allow us to return a specific element from that array and just pass that back. So if we do something like this, where we say var team equals, oh my goodness, team equals empty array, and we can actually just use a regular old for loop here. So for var I equals 0, I is less than, what do we want to do here? We want to do 6, right? So up to, but not including 6. I plus plus. We're going to do team.push. So we're going to push into this new array whatever the result of get random Pokemon with the Pokemon array in it is. So what is team? All right, so here we go. Fire, grass. What do we got? It takes a second. There we go. So we have 6 Pokemon at random. And you can see they're all over the place. The numbers are big and small. Whoa, 10,000. It's really interesting. Okay, well, let's see what that one's all about. Actually, I kind of want to see what that one's all about. Bloop. Hold on a second. Interesting. Okay, well, I'm going to Google it, because obviously that doesn't give me an image. I don't know what I was expecting. Oh, why is that 10,000, though? Anyways, I don't know. Oops. Okay, so we have 6 random Pokemon now. If you remember, the whole goal was to build a team of 6. So we have the 6 random. We actually don't have the random team yet. Or sorry, we don't have all of the team's information. We have the 6 Pokemon that we can use, but unfortunately, this call here, this doesn't have the actual Pokemon data we want. We have to make one last call to get that Pokemon data. So we're going to go back to our old friend map, and we're going to say, let's just do team equals team.map, teen, good lord, team.map function. I'm so happy that this auto-completes some words sometimes. We'll call that Pokemon, because it's going to be each individual Pokemon. And we're going to have to return, wait for it, $.ajax. URL, Pokemon.url. Oops, where'd my mouse go? There it is. And again, I'm just going to do the old, whoops. What am I looking to do here? Data type, JSON, and method get. Sweet. Cool. Okay, and I'm just going to skip the portion where I log that out. I will tell you that this is now an array that has all those calls on it, and I can say $.when, and again we have to use .apply null team .then function, and then let's make this thing an actual array. So we'll save our Pokemon. Geez, team, I guess. Really running out of things there. Prototype.slice. Nope, sorry, .call arguments. There we go. Cool. So let's console.log Pokemon team. Okay, fire, grass. And I'm going to open up the network panel because this is where you can see it takes some time. So I just need to verify that it actually does some work. And I mean, rightfully slow. It's calling quite a few things. But yeah, here we go. It's taking a little bit of time. Actually, this is quite a bit faster than normal. And I done messed up somewhere. Let's see where I messed up. I think it's this URL that I'm using. Is it the URL? Yep, it has to be. Oh, oddly, it's Pokemon.Pokemon. There we go. Whoops. Okay, we're almost there. Home stretch. So it goes out. It's getting all the Pokemon. It's actually calling all the Pokemon. It must have returned so quickly because of all those errors. Yeah. Here we go. Two more. One more. Here we go. Come on, come on. There we go. And again, we have this thing, but we have all of the Pokemon information. Pidgeotto. That's a weird way of saying Pidgeotto. Ooh, I can't say that one. Bulbasaur? No, give up. Crustle. I'm really excited to see these photos. So, Meryl. So this is really cool. So we're really close. We're gonna do one more thing to just get at these objects, and then I just want to throw this information on the page real quick. So we're in here. We have this stuff. Let's just take a second and let's map down what we want. And you know, honestly, we've done this sort of operation a couple times that we might probably be able to make our own function that does that for us. Actually, it's always a little bit different, isn't it? Yeah, so instead of, we're going in, it's a little bit different, but I guess we can't do that. So we're just going to do Pokemon team equals Pokemon team.map function. And what we need to get at is just the object. So all we want to do is we want to return, I never said that this takes anything. I'm just going to call it poke 0. Oh, wow. It's been a long day of typing. Console.log Pokemon team. Whoopsie doodle. All right, fire, grass. Nope, fire, grass. There we go. So again, this goes out, gets all of the types, gets all the double damage types, gets those types, returns those types. We get just the Pokemon out of that. Then we have to whittle that down to simply 6 Pokemon. Then we have to take those 6 and go get those Pokemon's actual information. Here we go. Amazing. Now we want to put this onto the page. So I'm just going to do something real simple here. And I am just going to actually just copy some code. I got to find it real quick. I'm just going to copy this, what I'm calling display Pokemon function. Boop. And what we're going to do is we're going to pass our Pokemon team into that. Display Pokemon. That will take the Pokemon's ID and actually get an image for us and put the name on the page and do all that. So if we've done everything correctly up to here. I can say fire. I can say grass. I can hit enter. Goes out, gets these two types of information. We get the double damage from those. That returns us a bunch of other types. We go out and get all of those types, the information for those types. We take out the Pokemon from that. We flatten it down so we have a list of like probably over 400 different Pokemon to choose from. We pick at random 6 of those Pokemon, and then we get these Pokemon here. So if we were up against a fire and grass Pokemon, this should be our team. Let's add a couple more in, like ghost and poison. I wonder if there's a way we could get that. I wonder how long this call will take though. But yeah, so I just wanted to kind of show this. Mostly this is for my students. This is a pretty like quick one-off. Oh, there you go. Oh, one doesn't have an image. Yeah, I wonder what these 10,000 Pokemon are. Love Trianatrom? I can't spell. I can't speak. Anyways, I wanted to show this mostly to my students because this is a fairly extreme case, I think, but there might be situations where you have multiple IDs. I know some students are working with song APIs that have multiple song IDs, and those IDs you have to go get all the information for that song and wait for it all to finish before you can maybe populate a playlist or something like that. And this pattern of taking an array of IDs, creating an array of AJAX calls, and then waiting for all of them to come back could really help you make things smoother. There's definitely ways you could do this via like your own for loops and stuff like that, but using sort of these functional map, and we never actually use filter or anything in here, but map and reduce and stuff like that can really help you. So I hope that helps. Again, hopefully it's not too like disjointed and all over the place, this video, but yeah, and I'm really excited to see what MK, the student who originally came up with this, does with this sort of idea with her own project. Cool. Okay. Bye-bye.